Vayavo. I mean, was he away?
Yeah,
And where was he? So there's a Ramban about that as well. Excuse me? Yeah, what's he doing there? What's he doing there, right? So the Ramban has a whole scenario. She tried to explain these events because it is a little enigmatic, right? That he comes. Others, of course, the Medrash says that she had died because he was away with Yitzchak at the Akedah. She heard this happened or almost happened, and she parcha nishmata. And then he comes because she's already died.
Someone says that was her desire, which she passed by passing away.
Meaning, how would she have failed?
Not reacting.
To the news.
Because it shows how deep her love was for Yitzchak. That just the thought of her of losing him was too much for the
Yeah, but it doesn't tell us that she consented, or that she affirmed, or that she would have chosen to do so, or anything by her dying because of that.
Well, it seems clear that she would not have gone along with it.
So how is the Nisayon?
Because that's a mother's nisayon. A mother's nisayon.
Mother's Nisayon is to show how much she loves her son?
Yeah. All right.
Who says this? I mean, can I look this up somewhere? It doesn't make sense to me. I understand. I'd like to see it in the flesh.
Where did I see that?
But of course it's a drasha. You understand? There's no indication in the text at all that this is so, except for the problem of having to explain what is Sara doing, dying, and Abraham coming, so-called after the fact. Right? I mean, at least according to the text, it sounds like Sara dies, a certain age, in a place. Where? In Hebron. Kiryat Arba at Hebron, right? You can go there today, by the way.
Yeah.
Kiryat Arba.
With you.
You want to go?
With you. To get her.
I'm ready.
To get it by.
All right.
Pesach time. This Pesach.
And it would be great.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
I think so.
Then we turn around and we speak to the Israeli government about a visa for your family, which will be like that, probably a month or two later. And then you won't have to worry about anything.
Thing like Abraham, you know.
Lech lecha mi'artzecha, me'oladedecha,
Yeah, but
me'beit avicha, el haaretz asher arecha.
bringing my
Like
family
that.
here and going to Israel with you. That's the way. Hopefully
Yeah.
this mess turn around and all the
Obstacles
test
will be broken. Will be
yes. You see, that's my way.
Test. Okay. No, fine, we do it any way you say. But you can go to the Kiryat Arba. So Sarah dies there, right?
Yes, sir.
And then the very next sentence it says, and Abraham came. He wasn't there with her, in other words, holding her hand when she died. He came to eulogize her and to bury her. And to cry, to mourn for her.
Yes.
And then he speaks to the people about trying to find a grave.
Yeah.
And he buys a grave, and the Marat HaMachpelah and so on. That this whole saga of several pages, right, ensues. So the question is, without talking about this business of his negotiations, but just let's say that this is so, what is Sarah doing? Where is Abraham when Sarah dies? Question. That's all. Question. Where is Abraham when Sarah dies?
Beersheba.
Rashi said it was in Moria.
How do you know? So the previous chapter ends that he comes back from the Akedah,
Akedah.
and it says that Vayeshev Avraham el Narav, Avraham comes back to his young men that he left there with the donkeys, with the mules, and they got up and they went together to Beersheba. To Beersheba. Why Beersheba? Vayeshiva Avraham Beersheba, and Avraham settles in Beersheba. So, do we assume he went back to Beersheba and his wife with him? Doesn't say.
Name.
Where was he before the Akedah?
He was in Maria.
Before the
No,
Akedah. Before the Akedah. Before Hashem told him to go to Hara Moriah, where was he? We only know that when he had the Brit Milah, where was he when the Malachim came?
What's in Hebron?
What?
What's in Hebron?
He was in Hebron?
Yeah.
Elon Mamre.
Yes?
Elon Mamre.
Eilein Omrei, which is somewhere, I don't know, where is it? Is it close to Hebron?
Yeah, it's close to Hebron.
It's supposed to be close to Hebron. People say Elonim Arei was one of the people who was like a person of Hebron, or the leader of Hebron or something, no?
Brother of.
But no, but there's a problem. One second. Yeah. When he saw the Malachim, it was just after his Brit Milah.
Yes, that's
Right? And there it says that he talked to Elonei, he was Elonei Mamre, right?
Yes.
Correct? At the time of the Akedah. But then there's a famine in the land.
Right.
And we skipped one story. And he leaves Elonei Mamre and he goes to Philistine land.
Philistine, yes.
And he has this interaction with Avimelech,
Right.
right? And he has trouble with his wife, and they take his wife, and then he sends him back, and then
Again,
they send him away. After he sends him away, there's Ishmael, and Ishmael is born, right?
When they were
And they send him away,
again
and she
to
goes.
Abimelech, they came with gifts again.
Who? Yes, and then. Va'etahi vayomer Abimelech. Abimelech comes. It's chapter 21, verse 22. Abimelech comes, right, to Abraham. And he says, promise me, I know now that God is with you, promise me that you will, let's make a covenant between us, right, that you will not attack us and I will not attack you, just like we did goodness with you, then you will do goodness with us. Abraham says, okay, I will swear. And Abraham tells him off for the filling of the wells. And he says, I didn't know about it. And therefore, he says, now you're telling me, so it's going to be okay. Abraham takes sheep and cattle, and he says to Abimelech, and he gives it to Abimelech, and they make a covenant. And Abraham puts the 7 sheep together by themselves, and Abimelech says, what's that? And he says, these are the 7 sheep that will be our covenant sign. Right? It's a sign between you and me that I have dug this well. You are affirming that I have dug this well. Abimelech says, fine, and they make a covenant, Be'er Shava, in the place which is called Be'er Shava, a well of the vow, a well of swearing. Nice name for, and also another play on words of 7, right? Sheva is 7.
Yes.
And Shava is Shua, so could be either way, right? It's the well of the 7 sheep, or the well of the vow.
And why
Or the
7 sheep? Because
he said he kept 7 sheep. Maybe that was a sign of a vow, because 7 sheep is going to be the special number that's going to be signed that we have made a vow between each other. So it's an interesting.
he's not a Kabbalistic man.
Interesting linguistics play, right?
Yeah.
He's not a what?
Kabbalistic.
Oh, maybe he's a Makubal, Abraham Avinu, yeah, so he maybe have, likes gematrias and who knows what. Yeah, but anyway, so but they are now in Beersheba when this takes place.
Right.
Good, I just wanted to bring that about, right? And then it says, Abraham planted an eshel, which is a big tree. If you want to see what an Eshel is, my friend Evan Eshu is going to speak here on November 2nd. Did you see that advertisement of a lecture that's going to be taking place Saturday night, November 2nd? He is a naturalist and a guide and a botanist and a historian and a very, very interesting guy in Israel we usually see him, and he takes us around in very exciting places in Israel, and he explored and discovered a Bar Kokhba cave himself that was never seen before. A very interesting fellow. He's going to speak here that Saturday night. So he showed me what an Eshel is. Apparently people discovered some time ago, not himself, there's a great botanist in Israel who now passed away, who did a lot of research about the things that are mentioned in the Torah. Eshel, what's an Eshel? It's not an English word, so if I was to ask you what kind of a tree is an Eshel tree, I don't know, right? But there's an Eshel tree. An Eshel tree is a very special tree that exudes water during the day, it evaporates water, and at night when it cools off, the water evaporates from the leaves and it leaves behind salt. Salt. So the exudate is watery salt. And of course when you evaporate water that is salty, you get powdered salt, right? That's how you make salt. And you see salt flats.
So there is not only salt in the sea or in the caves?
There's salt in the street. It sucks up salts from the ground, and in with its water, it's an Eshel, it's a special tree, right? And it has tremendously big, it's a big tree with a lot of shade, so people like to sit under this shade, right? And then salt is in the leaves, so they can use it for the food that they have as well. So it's anyway, apparently there's some ideas about what this Eshel is. So he planted this Eshel, right? Which is a place in which he will have guests. He will take in guests, like a hotel, right? In Beersheba, and he called out in the name of God, the Lord of the world, declaring God, to teach the people about God. Vayagar Abraham and he lived there for many years, for a long time. Then, in this place, Hashem comes to him and he says to him, go out and do the Akedah. So that means they were living in Beersheba.
He was living.
Well, his wife came back from Philistine land together with him, no? I mean, she's not, nothing has happened yet to separate them, I would imagine, right? He came back from Philistine land with his wife,
Well,
having had...
unless you didn't appreciate having been abandoned by him.
So they're separated.
I don't know. I don't know.
Whoa. I'm not saying it's impossible. I never heard this theory before in my life. It's a very interesting theory.
I know. I would not, I don't think I appreciate it myself.
Wow. You know something else that took place before is this business of Ishmael and Hagar where they send him off. Just before Abimelech comes.
Yeah, and actually I'm told.
So let's assume they're together. They are together. At first they are together. No, I have to take it all back. You're wrong about that part. Because they are together to the point where she says to Abraham, you take Hagar because I'm not having children, and he takes Hagar and she has a child, and then Hagar first is pregnant and she torments her and she runs away, and then Hashem, Malach tells her to come back, and she comes back, and then she has a baby, and then Sara is there because Sara becomes angry at seeing Yitzchak and Ishmael playing together. He's not going to inherit with me, with my son.
You see Ishmael laughing.
Whatever she sees him do, and well, she says, send him away with his mother, right? Send him away with his mother, and he does, and she goes away. So they are together at that point.
He does, not particularly willingly.
Does fine,
Hashem,
absolutely right. And then he sends her away penniless with almost nothing. So let's not talk about that part. But for the moment, I just want to prove that Sarah is with him.
Okay. Right.
You say, laughing. I was.
Unless you say,
The Torah says that he was Mithnachic.
Yeah, it's not. Why? Let's not get into that. Wait. We're trying to solve a problem. Where is Sarah and where is Abraham? That's what we're trying to do. Let's stay on the point.
All right.
So she is together with him at that point. Now you may want to say, if you want to make a break between them, you may want to say that this whole event of her being angry that Ishmael is there and forcing Abraham to send him away with his mother, right? And Hashem, it wasn't good in his eyes, in Abraham's eyes. He was upset about sending away Ishmael, but Hashem tells him, you listen to your wife. Do whatever she says, right? It might have caused some friction. Abraham agrees. Abraham, obeys, right? He doesn't feel good about it necessarily. He obeys what Sarah said, because Hashem told him. He wasn't good in his eyes, and he feels pretty terrible about it, but he does. Could it be that at that point, Sarah leaves and goes to a different place and they don't live together? Is it conceivable?
Could be.
I'm not saying this, it's Pinky who said it.
She has a good reason to.
If you want to blame somebody for this theory, it's Pinky's theory. So why are we saying this? So before we talk about theories, why are we saying this? Because immediately after he is living in Beersheba, the Torah tells us, he is living in Beersheba many years in Philistine land. Hashem comes to him at that time and tells him, bring him up to an Akedah. I want you to sacrifice your son Yitzchak, right? Whatever it means, it takes place there. He didn't leave there. It says he is in Philistine land, and Hashem speaks to him to go and do the Akedah. So he is in Beersheba. He leaves Beersheba to go all the way to Har Moriah. It's a pretty long walk.
So
it takes him 3 days to get there.
In Beersheba? No. He was living there.
No, he didn't. I don't know where he was born. Where was he born? Could be. Yitzchak. Yeah, could be. Yeah, could be. He himself, Abraham, had a Brit Milah in Elohim Moreh, and so did Ishmael. But then sometimes takes at least 13 years or so, right? No, even more. I don't know. How long did they say, how old did they say Ishmael
30.
was? 37? How old was Ishmael when they sent him away?
Why do you say so old? Maybe 13?
No, 13 is when he had the Brit Milah.
Oh.
Right? And then some time passes between that and his giving birth to Yitzchak, no? I don't know. I think it is written somewhere that he was about 30s. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. But it's fine, some time passes, right? Abraham has Brit Milah, Ishmael has Brit Milah. Some time passes, they're growing up. Ishmael has grown up already, or more than 13. Yitzchak is born. And Abraham gives him a Brit Milah also when he's 8 days old. Fine, like he should, right? He's 100 years old, by the way, when Yitzchak is born. You could do the math. He's 100 years old when Yitzchak is born. When did he have Ishmael?
Earlier.
Don't know. But they are now living in, and then he goes to Philistine land, and Avimelech has this business, and he goes away, and he lives in Beersheba, and Avimelech and him make a vow over this well in Beersheba, and he plants a tree that's an Eshel in Beersheba, and he lives in Beersheba many years. That's the way the Torah tells it. Immediately after that it says, and at that time, Hashem comes to him and tells him, sacrifice your son. And he goes. He ends up in Har Moriah. If his wife is with him, she's in Beersheba, waiting. He wakes up in the morning and he leaves home. He doesn't tell her where he's going. Right? And he's away for 3 days. Pinky.
Yeah, I'm listening.
He's away for 3 days from Beersheba. He travels to Har Moriah. Is it possible to travel in 3 days? Yeah, it's a big trek.
This is what it is.
If you had to walk from Beersheba to Yerushalayim to Har Bayit, you could do it in 3 days, but it's a big trek. Because you can drive it.
It's desert.
You can drive, well, there was a way. There is a derech avot. You could actually see the trail. So they claim that they know the trail that people used to walk to Yerushalayim from the south.
I gotta get again.
And you could see it today. I mean, especially in Gush Etzion, there's that derech avot.
And
So fine. So he gets there, and he sacrifices his son. And the Torah doesn't tell you anything else. He returns from doing that. He returned from doing that, and it says that he and his boys, he met his boys, and he returns to Beersheba. Right? That's what we just now said. After the Akedah, Hashem stops him, and he goes back to his young men, chapter 22, verse 19, and they go back to Beersheba. And he settles in Beersheba. So where in God's name is Sara? She's probably there. This is the mystery. Correct? He goes back to Beersheba.
Stay in Beersheba.
He came from Beersheba, he's going back to Beersheba.
Abraham was told, saying, behold, Milcah too has...
Yeah, forget about that. And by the by, he hears some news about other... No, before that. He went to Beersheba. And then there's this little interlude about him hearing about relatives who had children. Fine, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. That's it. Comes now the statement that...
So he's in Beersheba.
Comes now the statement... Now, you could make up any story you want now.
There's a whole zilla ba'er ki hatzedekes mesa Eretz Yisrael l'sham nikbara ki yachitim mimishbechos Canaan ולפי דעתי איתם הכתוב ממאינו אלו להזכיר כי היא ארץ כנען לא ארץ פלשתים כי מפני שאמר ויגר אברהם ארץ פלשתים ימים רבים וכל מגבורה בארץ ההיא בגרור בנחל גרור ובאר שבע ומשם לחברון ומחברון לשם אגיד אזכיר כי חברון הוא בארץ הכנעני ושם מואר הוא לא בארץ פלשתים הנזכרת בארץ.
Right. So he's saying, you know what's important about telling you that Sarah died in Beersheba, in Hebron, is that she should die. We want to tell you that she had the merit that she died not in Plishtim land, but in Canaanite land. Canaanite land was promised to the Jewish people, right? Plishtim land, I don't know. The Torah never says, I'm going to give you Eretz HaPlishtim. It says Eretz Moriv, Eretz this, and Eretz that, and Eretz that, right? Then Plishtim land is not promised to the Jewish people. Which means, by the way, that's why today we don't have Gaza.
But that was in the...
That's why we don't have Gaza, because Gaza was... No.
Yeah, because Hashem is talking about, he's speaking about from the river...
to the sea.
To the sea, so that is included this part.
Not necessarily. We now have from the river to the sea. Tel Aviv is on the sea, but Gaza is south.
But
it's also
look
in the
at
sea,
the south. Look at the south.
So who told you that you're going to have the sea all the way?
The Nile until the big river and to the sea.
To the Nile? Nobody said the Nile.
Yeah.
No,
in the beginning.
Nobody said the Nile that we were promised to the Nile.
The big river referring to the Nile. That is not.
No, never. We were never promised the Nile. The Sinai Peninsula, we were promised Eretz Yisrael would be in the Sinai Peninsula. No,
that was the first promise.
That's not correct. No, I don't think that's right.
Okay, I have to see that.
No, that's not true. I don't think so. But anyway, when God talks about all the nations that He's going to displace and bring the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael and give it to them, He did not mention Plishtim land.
Plishtim came from what descendant?
I don't know.
Because
why
we know that they
are who they are. They're not
Canaanites.
Canaanites. They're not Canaanites.
Canaanites, I think.
The Canaanites are living in Hebron. And the Ramban that he was just reading, in fact, this is which chapter and verse is that? We're trying to figure out why is Sarah dying in Hebron if she's living in Beersheba?
It's-
That's the question.
Exactly, yes.
That's the question.
It's very
That's
close.
So, what? Chapter 23, you mean to say? Chav Gimel.
So in
makes sense to me.
verse,
Chav Gimel, yes, 23 verse 19. 23:19. Is that right?
Okay, let me get this picture. So in 22:19, Abraham returned to his young men, and they stood up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham stayed
22,
in Beersheba. 22.
No, it's 23:19.
Yeah.
No, he just wants to tell you. So we established that he went back to
Was
Beersheba.
Beersheba. So in 23, said in verse 2, Sara died in Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron in the land of Canaan.
That is our problem.
Yes, this is problem.
How did it happen? Right? So,
She was there and Abraham was here.
did she go there to buy sushi meat because they had
Yeah.
fresh fish in Hebron one day and she died? I mean, make up a story. The trouble is the Torah is silent.
Yes.
I mean, she could have gone to the supermarket. There's a Costco in Hebron. I mean, so she left Beersheba one day and went a trip. And while she was there on a trip, she died. I mean, I'm making right? And Beersheba is where Abraham is, and he hears that she died, and he says, "Oh my goodness, my wife died." And he goes to mourn, and to make a hesped to eulogize his wife in Hebron. He wasn't living there; he was living in Beersheba. That's one scenario.
Yes.
The other scenario is, you know what? Yes, he lived there for a long time, but he left with his wife. The Torah doesn't bother telling you everywhere he went. So he built an Eshel, and he was living in Beersheba a long time. And then he stopped living in Beersheba, and he decided to go up north. It's too hot and too dry in Beersheba, too much dust in the desert. I want to live in a more fertile place where there's some grapevines and so on in Hebron. So he lived in Hebron. I mean, the Torah doesn't say, right? So now maybe he is living in Hebron. But if he is living in Hebron, why does it say, and Abraham she dies, and Abraham came to eulogize her. So you could say, okay, they're both living in Hebron, and he's out in the hills taking care of his sheep, and he came. I mean, right? Anything you say is possible. It's a mystery. The Torah doesn't tell you. But it sounds like they're not together, maybe. Right?
Sounds like that, yes.
So why is this whole story being told? According to the Ramban, which is look at chapter 23, chapter 19, verse 19. 23:19
23:19.
in the Ramban. Which he finally succeeds. This is at the end, right? He finally succeeds in buying the grave. The grave.
And afterwards, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan.
Right. So the Torah is we know that she died in Hebron, right?
Yes.
But the Torah is here emphasizing, I want you to know, Abraham buried her in this place, and this place, and this place, which he bought, which is in Hebron. So, in Eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan. Do we not know this? I don't know. So, comes the Ramban and says, Ki shav lebe'er hasadeh, v'hamakom v'ha'aretz, ba'avur ki kol ha'parsha iskira b'nei chet ve'efron achiti, lefichach iskir basof, ki hu be'eretz Canaan, asher hi Eretz Yisrael. V'chein amar b'tchilat ha'parsha b'kiryat arba hi Hebron be'eretz Canaan. וכל זה לבאר כי הצדקת מתה בארץ ישראל ושם נקברה כי החיתים משפחות כנען. You see that what the Ramban is saying? ולפי דעתי כי טעם הכתובים אינו אלא להזכיר כי היא ארץ כנען ולא ארץ פלישתים. We want you to understand that this land that she is buried in is not Eretz Plishtim but it's Canaan. כי מפני שאמר because it had said before that we were talking about Vayagar Abraham be'Eretz Plishtim Yamim Rabim, that he lived in Eretz Plishtim a long time. V'chol migurav be'Eretz Ahi Bigrar, and all of the time that he was living, all of his dwelling time is in Eretz Grar, right, which is, by the way, in Plishtim land. V'nachal Grar u'be'er Sheva. Bigrar, Vinachal Grar, Uber Sheva. Those are the places in which she was living until now, right? Umisham, and from Beersheba to Hebron. Wait a second. Umisham lechebron, umechebron lesham. Ze ma'anyen. What is going on? You mean he's trying to suggest that they went back and forth from that place frequently? For some reason? Why would they move back and forth? Because he's familiar with these people as a result of his Brit Milah nearby? Why does he assume that there is coming and goings between the place? Says.
Well, this say, Pasuk Bay is Bayavo Abraham.
So we have to do that too. Let's assume let's assume they're traveling back and forth. We have to get to it. So you're right. They're assuming that they're traveling between the two places, Beersheba and Hebron, all the time. Al Kain Iskir, Ki Hebron hu be'eretz HaKna'ani hayoshev b'harahi, lo be'eretz Plishtim eskeret l'Avraham. Right? Therefore, the Torah wants to tell you, since they were in both places, which I don't understand why we know, but since they were in both places at times, the Torah goes out of its way to tell you that she's buried and died in Eretz Israel land, which is Canaanite land, rather than in Eretz Plishtim, which we assume is not. והוסיף בסוף להודיע המהרש"י בשדה המכפלה על פני ממרא, שזה השם הנודע אליה. This is the name, all right. ונכתבה זאת הפרשה להודיע חסדי השם עם אברהם, שהיה נשיא אלוהים בארץ, אשר בא לגור שם. Yep. Oh, this is very interesting. It contradicts something that Rashi said later on. Very interesting. We want to tell you, the Torah wants to tell you this whole story. The truth is, it's a little bit difficult to understand why so many verses are discussing how the negotiations was going on. This way and that way. Give me the field, don't give me the field. He says, no, you can have the field anywhere you want. No, I want that place. He says, and I want to pay you. He says, you don't really have to pay me. Go ahead and bury. After all, what's it worth? Just 400 kesef. He says, oh, I understand, so I'll pay you. And then he pays him. All these negotiations are mentioned here, right? Why is that being said? So the Ramban wants to tell you that the Torah goes out of its way to show you that Abraham was very much supported and helped by the Kadosh Baruch Hu, by God, in the sense that when he comes to the people and says, I need to bury my wife, they said, oh, Nesi Elohim ata b'kirbeinu, you are a prince of God among us. Which shows that Abraham, a single little man, who came from Ur Kasdim not too long ago, right, some years ago, from a foreign land, and he comes to Eretz Israel and he walks around, had become a very famous person. I mean, why would anybody call him Nesi Elohim? Prince of God, you are among us. Remember, by the way, also when he saved the people of Sodom, he came back and Melchizedek said to him, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Abraham, and so on, right? So he is evidently very prominent, according to the Ramban, that's what the Torah wants to tell you, and that's a generosity of God, that even a stranger like that in this land is going to be like that. And he was rich and respected, like Hashem had promised him. I will be good to you and your 4 children after you, and so on.
And you will be great also.
Where? Oh, wait a second. Wait. Oh, no. And he speaks. And he speaks to Ephron, right? Who is a rich man and a very respected man. And he says, between me and you, what is this field? And he didn't, and it wouldn't normally be honorable for a local man to sell a portion of his family plot to anybody, right? Therefore, Abraham didn't go to him right away, and he went to the, right. So, it shows how important Abraham was, that Ephron was ready to show him great respect. The people showed him great respect by calling him the Prince of God, and Ephron, who owned his land, as part of the family place, was ready to let him buy a piece of land in his family place. That wasn't, according to the Ramban, that wasn't customary to just sell off pieces of land that belonged to your family. right? And they only did that because Abraham was going to bury his wife, and because he's a very famous person and he's a very prominent man. So a man like that, you would be prepared to sell a piece of your land to, right? So the Ramban wants to tell you that this whole story is to illustrate how Abraham was favored by God. He told him, come with me to the land that I will show you, Lech Lecha, and I will be good to you and I will bless you, right? And you will be a bracha to all the nations of the world. And we see that part of it is coming true because here everybody treats him with great respect, right? That he's already a famous person. That's what the Ramban wants to say. Now remember, though, he's trying to say that part of God's promise is already being fulfilled. God promised him, I will make you great, and he is great. God promised him, I will bless you, he is blessed. God promised him that the nations of the world will be blessed from you, they will recognize you, that you are a source of blessing for them, and you see that it's true. That's what the Ramban wants to say, right? That they treat him with great respect. Now, he's not dealing with the problem of the location, right? But he did let slip for just a moment that the Torah wants to tell you that she died and she was buried in Hebron rather than in Philistine, even though they were living in Philistine for a long time and they came back and forth. He makes it up. I don't know. Yeah, they came back and forth to Hebron because he can't imagine that they're separated, right? Sometimes they were in Hebron, sometimes they were in Philistine land, and the Torah wants to tell you that she died and she was buried in Hebron because that's Eretz Israel, and that this righteous woman died in Eretz Israel, which is a great thing, right? One day maybe I will die in Eretz Israel. Not to be buried only, but also to die in Eretz Israel. But a lot of holy people want to be buried in Eretz Israel, but they don't want to go there while they're alive. But she, right?
Like
you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like some people we know. So, the emphasis at the end of the Ramban, I find very interesting. I was waiting for you to come back. He wants to say that the Torah describes all of these comings and goings with the buying of the grave to illustrate that God's promise to him was being fulfilled. God told him, you will be great, and he is a great man. Everybody calls him Nasi Elohim. God told him that you will be blessed, right? And we could see that even Ephron, who normally would not be prepared to sell to just some guy a piece of his family plot, is ready to deal with him with great respect because he is Nasi Elohim Ata B'Kirbeinu. He's a great man among us.
Although he demands a steep price.
It's fine, right? But to the Ramban, I'm talking about the Ramban feels that this is a sign that he is a favored man. No matter what you charge him, he wouldn't be ready to sell it to anybody. Stam kacha, altogether. That's the Ramban's language. I'm not making this up. That's the Ramban. So I'm saying it's interesting that according to the Ramban's perspective, what's happening here is that the Torah is trying to show you that Abraham is very elevated person and he has a lot to be thankful for, that God is fulfilling his promise. Why do I bring that up? Why do I bring that up? Do you remember a problem of Abraham seeing God's promise fulfilled? Do you remember some contradiction to this whole principle?
Maybe the Akedah with the contradiction?
No. Later on. You're right. Of course that's true. Yes, but no. If you remember in Mitzrayim, Moshe is sent by God to deal with the Jewish people for the first time, right? And they believe him that God sent him to free them, right? But then Paro comes and he says, to hell with you, I'm not going to give you any more straw, you have to make just as many bricks as before, you're just making them lazy, I'll show you, I'm going to make it even harder, right? And he does. Moshe sees this, and he goes back to God and he says, why did you send me? You only made things worse for the Jewish people. You told me that they will free them and they haven't been freed, it's only way worse. So God says to him, very special, it's an amazing confrontation, right, between Moshe and God. And God says to him, now you will see that I will save them. There was a time when I was known to the forefathers, not with my name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, God, Hashem, right, Jehovah. They never knew me that way. They knew me as El Shaddai, which means somehow the God who said to the world that it's enough, the creator, but not the one who fulfills his promises. Not, right? You will now know that I am the one who fulfills my promise. I promise that I will take the Jewish people out, and you will see that I will do it, right? Correct? And there Rashi brings a Gemara and says, you know what God is saying to him? I wish that you were a little bit more similar to my beloved Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, right? And I remember them with great love. Why? You are not as good as them, he's saying to Moshe, according to the Medrash, right? Mm-hmm. Because they knew me as the God who promised, but they never knew me as the one who fulfills his promises. I'll give you an example. Abraham, I promised him the land of Israel. And then his wife dies. And he doesn't even have a piece of sand. He doesn't even have to bury her. And he could say to himself, this is God who promised me. And he's in the middle of his grief. He's in the middle of sadness, right? So when you're in the middle of sadness and you are driven to desperation to bury your wife, and then you say to yourself, this is what God promised me, that he will give me the land of Israel. I can't even find a spot to bury my wife. That's a promise, right? I mean, so, and yet he believed in me. Even though I had not fulfilled my promise to him yet. He believed in me that one day I would, right? Excuse me. I'm trying to get off. Okay. So you understand, I mean, I bring that up because there the emphasis is on their having faith in God, even though they are still desperate. They're not, they don't see the promise of God coming true, right? And here the Ramban, at least in a sense, is showing that the Torah is going out of its way to show you how prominent Abraham is, how beautiful he's treated by other people, how when he needs something they are saying, of course, anywhere you want is fine with us. Yeah, so he's not driven to desperation that he doesn't even have a piece of land. It isn't his.
But they didn't really mean that.
I don't know.
Because if they had really meant it, they would have given him this take it.
No, he wanted this particular one.
Okay. So
I think from the text anyway, they say, listen, you are an Asiyah Leim among us, bury your mate wherever you wish among our fields. I mean, and he said, no, I want you to go to Ephron.
So Ephron actually heard this.
And he said, okay, go ahead.
And the sea Elohim Mesachenu, he would have not have charged 400 shekel kesef. He would have been more. Here, take my Mara, please. You're such a great person.
No, he says, I want to buy it in cash.
I know.
He says to him, I want to buy it in cash. And Ephron says to him, listen, my master, listen to me. I give you this field in order to bury your dead.
Okay.
Period. And Abraham says, no.
I don't want it.
I don't want it for free. I want to pay it for money. Right? And he says, of course, okay, listen, for 400 shekel, if you insist to pay for it, then what is that between us?
That's a funny,
go ahead and marry.
That's a funny statement.
That's the way people like to think about it.
Right.
That's the way people like to think about it. Remember, Abraham's a very rich man, and so this man is a very rich man. Among the Buffetts of the world, I don't know if that's an extraordinary statement. I don't know. So for $2 million, you can bury this, you can have this piece of land. I mean, for me, of course, it would be ridiculous, right? But let's say Bill Gates and Buffett are talking about where he'll bury his wife. I mean, Chas v'shalom, she's not dead. He says, listen, I mean, if you can have my ranch, I mean, for $2 million, it's nothing between us. I don't know. I'm not sure if the Medrash, if the popular notion of Ephron being a bad guy is really fair. I understand it's a popular one. But in any case, the Ramban is trying to show that he ignores this part, right? The Ramban is trying to say they are treating him with high regard. The very fact that he's even entertaining the idea of selling it to someone means that this man is a prince, right? And therefore, the Ramban wants to tell you that this shows how Hashem had promised him he's going to be great, and he is great. Okay, I just bring that as an aside. But we haven't dealt with the problem of Beersheba and Hebron. Although the Ramban does say that it seems like they were here and there. So the Torah wants to tell you that she died here. Why were they here and there? So now we got to go to the Ramban, chapter 23, verse 2.
Right.
Let's see. Now this is an important Ramban. We're trying to figure out why is Abraham coming?
Coming from where?
Coming from where? Chapter 2, verse 2. He came, right? That's what we're trying to figure out. Coming. What do you mean coming? Where is he? Right? So Rashi says, the Ramban quotes, you have the Ramban?
Yes, sir.
Rashi says, he's quoting Rashi, and he says that he came from Beersheba, right? Because the Torah had said the last thing we saw was he's living in Beersheba. She dies in Hebron, so he's coming from Beersheba to Hebron. And we don't understand why, right? ואין זה לומר שהיה עומד שם ממה כתוב וישב אברהם בירושבה כי איך תהיה שרה בחברון. I mean, that's the problem. How could you tell me that he is living in Beersheba? That doesn't mean, right? Even though Rashi says that he's coming from Hebron, from Beersheba, it doesn't mean that he was living there.
But he said he's going for the day. That means that.
Wait. He's trying to say he came from Beersheba. He agrees. He came from Beersheba to bury her, and she died there. But don't think, he says, that means that he's living in Beersheba and she's in Hebron. That they're, like Pinky would suggest, that maybe they had a falling out and they're separated and they're undergoing some kind of divorce proceedings, right? I mean,
I know it's a little.
Don't think that.
It's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, of course it is. Don't think that he was living there and dwelling there because it had said that Abraham was dwelling in Beersheba for many years. Don't think that's still continuing now, because otherwise, what is she doing in Hebron? How is she separated from her husband? But what does it mean? But instead, הכוונה לומר, שהלך שם ביום לצורכו. He went there to buy a camel. I mean, whatever, right? I mean, we'll see. In other words, they are in Hebron, he is claiming. They live in Hebron. And he went there for the day or two to do something. To Beersheba. I mean, after all, Beersheba is an important part in the caravan route to go to Egypt. Beersheba is on that Derech Avot. You know, if you go to Yerushalayim, all the way to Syria, to Ur Kasdim, there was a path. There was a path. It was a well-known caravan, and it passed by Yerushalayim, and it went over the Gush, and it went down to Beersheba, and it went over to Philistine land, and it went over to Egypt. People used to, it's a thoroughfare place. So Beersheba is a major marketplace or whatever, right? And so he was living in Hebron, he wants to tell you. Even though the Torah never records that they moved.
No.
We have to just assume, the Torah doesn't have to tell you everything. Right? If somebody had sneezed, for example, the Torah doesn't say, and Pinky sneezed. I mean, it tells you what is important for you to know. So he is saying you have to assume that they moved to Hebron. What is he doing coming from Beersheba? He went to Beersheba like people go to Beersheba on business. He's suggesting, right? V'shama b'mitat Sara, and while he was away, he heard that his wife had died, right? Uba misham lispod la'odogotan. That's where he's coming from now. Are you with me?
Yes, but I am trying to link because he said, I don't know if Rashi said he was living in Beersheba.
No,
he came from
not.
Beersheba to Mount Moriah with his son.
That was before, and he indeed lived there for a long time.
Yeah.
But then he stopped living there. He's saying, the Ramban is saying, he came to Hebron. They're living in Hebron. It's obvious, he says, because otherwise, what's Sarah doing there? right?
But we understand that Sarah died because of the, you know, the...
No, we don't
Midrash,
understand. We do not understand. No. You understand that because you've been told this when you were 5 years old. That Sarah died because she heard about the Akedah.
Yes.
The Ramban obviously doesn't feel that that's true, because the Torah doesn't say that at all, right?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, 20 years could have passed between the two times. How do you know when this happened? I mean, right? This is a traditional story. Rashi says that, right? You understand? Okay, so Rashi has to deal with the problem, right? In fact, Rashi, according to Rashi, why did he go back to Beersheba? Because that's where they were living. What is she doing in Hebron, according to Rashi? Akedah happened from Beersheba. So he's going back to Beersheba. So what is she doing? Maybe she went shopping. I mean, what is she doing in Hebron to die, according to Rashi? She heard that what?
She was his living place, her living place.
Her, not his?
So where are they living now?
Not Abraham?
But Abraham is sojourning to make business.
No. You said she died because of the Akedah, the story of the Akedah.
Yeah, that's one.
According to this story, Rashi says that.
Yes.
Rashi brings that. So Rashi, according to Rashi, let's assume we'll buy it.
All right.
The Akedah just took place. She died, and Abraham, they were living in Beersheba before the Akedah, right?
Here in Beersheba.
And he went back to Beersheba home, and he sees the house is empty.
Yes.
Where is Sarah? So he hears, oh, Sarah is in Hebron and she died. What is she doing in Hebron? Why is she not here? According to Rashi's story. That's also a mystery. What is she doing? So Abraham, the Ramban is solving the mystery in a completely different way. Don't talk to me about the Akedah, it has nothing to do with this. They went back to Beersheba after the Akedah. Sarah says, hi, how are you? And they live in Beersheba for a long time. Period. A lot of things happened in between, and they moved to Hebron, together. Right? Yitzchak, Abraham, and Sarah moved to Hebron. What happens then is that Abraham still does business with Beersheba, and one day he went to Beersheba and he says, I'll see you tonight, wife, Sarah. And then while he was there, he heard, your wife died while you were away. Mm-hmm. And he comes, Vayavo, and he comes from Beersheba to mourn her. No mystery according to him, except that the Torah never mentions that they moved. Okay, so the Torah never mentions that they moved, so far. Okay, let's go on. Uva misham lispol v'kota. V'lashon rabotenu mehar hamoriyah. Right? That's what you know. The Medrash that says he came from where? He came from the Har HaMoriah, because v'chein hu lefi ha-Medrash shekatvu harav meaning Rashi, I believe. Right? Ki sham'a be'akedah uparcha nishmata. She heard about the Akedah and she died. Right? Mm-hmm. So he heard in Har HaMoriah, on his way down from Har HaMoriah, he heard, your wife died in Hebron. Right? Mm-hmm. What's she doing in Hebron? We also don't know. Right? I mean, right? Because remember the story, there too you would have to say somehow that they ended up in Hebron somehow. Right? And he seems to say the commandment to sacrifice Isaac came while he was in Beersheba. That the Torah says, right? Kisham hayadar v'sham chazar, and there he was living before the Akedah, and there he went and he returned. Ki kein katuv b'tchila vayita eshel beVeersheba yikra b'sham b'shem Elohim vayamer vayagar Avraham be'eretz plishtim yamim rabim. That's obvious, right? V'hu gemuto beVeersheba, shehu be'eretz plishtim, v'sham nistaveh ba'akedah. There he was commanded about the Akedah. V'alkein shaha b'derech shlosha yamim. And therefore it took 3 days to travel, because it takes a long time to travel from Eretz Plishtim to Yerushalayim. Right? Good. She'ilu Hebron behar Yehudahu kikein katuv v'karov l'Yerushalayim. Hebron is close to Yerushalayim. He's trying to prove to you that the commandment to give the Akedah, to sacrifice Isaac, came in Beersheba.
Okay,
We're not, he's trying to build it up, one step at a time.
Right.
He must have been commanded to the Akedah in Beersheba. He says it's logical that that would take place because of two things. One thing is because the Torah told you just before that he lived in Beersheba with the Eshel. He planted the Eshel and he lived in Beersheba. And then right away after that it says, and God came to Abraham to command him. So it must have been then, while he was living there. Not only that, I'll prove to you even more. If you want to tell me that the Pasuk 1 that tells you he lived in Beersheba and the Pasuk 2 that he commanded him to do the Akedah didn't take place at the same time, and maybe they moved to Hebron in the meantime, and then the command to do the Akedah came from Hebron. Maybe you want to tell me. He says that's not logical, because the Torah says it took him 3 days to travel to find the place that Hashem had commanded him from far to do the Akedah. And it doesn't take 3 days to travel from Hebron to Har Yerushalayim. It's about a 15-minute drive.
What about walk?
Well,
Okay,
to walking, it could be much. Maybe the geography knowledge of the Mefarshim is not so terrific. Hebron to walk to Yerushalayim, especially if you don't know exactly where you're going. He wasn't told. He says, "Go to the place where I will show you."
Was there a cloud over it or something?
Okay,
That's a message
guys,
too.
well,
That's a
we
very
are
good.
thinking about being men. We are not forgetting Sarah. Sarah wasn't told to my wife, I have some bad news for you, but
she was not
Hashem
told. She was not
commanded
told.
me to...
Apparently she wasn't told. At least the Torah doesn't say so.
That's...
Well, they said it's something told her.
Well, that's the Medrash. You see, the Medrash, according to Rashi, the Rashi's Medrash is that he never told her. And then someone whispered in her ear about this after
This is
Abraham was gone.
an humanity.
And she died. So you would
He was a
think
kind
that
man.
Abraham should tell her. But
How
on the
is
other
possible
hand,
that
he
doesn't say her.
must have felt that she would go crazy and she wouldn't let him do Hashem's bidding because he couldn't expect a woman to accept it. So he thought that he couldn't tell her. I don't know. You're asking me a separate question. We're trying to figure out the place so far, right? So let's assume that the Ramban is trying to prove to you that it doesn't take 3 days to walk from Hebron to Beersheba, to Har Moriah, and therefore this must have taken place in Beersheba. Okay? Karov, he says. Karov Yerushalayim. So therefore it took place from Beersheba. Beersheba is where he took off from to go to the Akedah. And then when he returned from the Akedah to Beersheba, he goes back because that's where home is. Good. כמו שנאמר, וישב אברהם אל נערה ויקומו וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבע, וישב אברהם באר שבע. להורות שנתעכב שם וישב טוב שנים. Therefore it sounds like he went back with his boys and Yitzchak to Beersheba, and that's where they lived.
And that's with Sara.
It assumes like with Sarah. V'im Cain lo meta Sara באותו זמן, and therefore Sarah didn't die at the time of the Akedah because he went back to Beersheba. And Beersheba is where they lived
And maybe she didn't
for
know.
some time.
She didn't know about it yet.
And maybe she didn't know about it at all. He's coming back with Yitzchak, and she says, "Hi, you had a nice trip? Did you have a nice trip? Went camping together? Very nice. It's nice to see you back." That's all, period. You say, right? And they lived in Beersheba. He says, he rejects Pinky's idea that it's impossible that Abraham would be living in Beersheba and Sarah is living in Hebron. A wife lives with her husband. A husband lives with his wife, right? It's impossible. What's going on, right? So it appears that Yitzchak was born in Beersheba. Remember? Because Avimelech came to do it right. כי כתוב תחילה ויסע משם אברהם ארצה הנגב וישב בין קדש ובין שור ויגר בגרר. It says that when he left Avimelech after that catastrophe, when his wife was taken, he left and he went to a place called between Kadesh and Shur, and he lived in Gerar, which is in Plishtim land. Avimelech amar elav Hinei artzi lefanecha. Avimelech said to him, "Listen, you could live in anywhere in this land. Katuv beinecha shav, shave, live wherever you like." Vanitias shave sham ba'eretz ahi be'Beersheba, and he lived in Beersheba. That's where Yitzchak was born. Shekein katuv v'hi v'yet ahi v'yomer v'melech v'pitrot tzatzao el Avraham, and so on. It's Lamor. Ve'ein katuv shalchu elav migrar v'yichutu sham brit b'ver Sheva. Right? But rather, v'chein tir'eh ki Hagar kasher hotziu otam mibeit Avraham b'yom yigamelet Yitzchak al chava midbar Be'er Sheva. Right? And you see also when Hagar was sent away, she goes into the desert of Be'er Sheva. That means they were living in Be'er Sheva, and she goes out into the desert.
Be'er Sheva is Philistine or Eretz?
Eretz Philistine. Well, he says that later on.
He
He says that later on. That's a good question. I don't know. Shesham hayu darim, because that's where they were living. Aval achar yamim rabim. Now he's trying to tell you. But after many days, nasa me'eretz Philistine u'ba leChevron v'niftira sham tzadeket. He says, my scenario is the Akedah took place from Be'er Sheva. He goes up to Har Moriah from Be'er Sheva. It takes 3 days. He comes back from there with his son. Sara never knew anything about the Akedah. Maybe he tells her afterwards. I don't know. She doesn't know, right? And they live in Be'er Sheva again, happily ever after. And then he says, in order to explain how Sara dies in Be'er Sheva, in Hebron, they move to Hebron together, like our scenario that we said. Well, who says not? Right? You got a better job. He went to Hebron, right? IBM moved him. And he went to Hebron, and he's living in Hebron. Now, you want to tell me she dies in Hebron. That makes sense, because she lived in Hebron. Why does it say, and he came? That was our problem. He came. It sounded like he's coming from somewhere. So he's saying because he went out on business for the day.
That is a little weak.
Everybody's got pieces that have to be explained, right? He's got pieces. So he thinks he's got a strong case because from Hebron to Har Moriah would not make sense because it doesn't make sense. And because the Pasuk says they were living in Be'er Sheva and so on and so on. But he's got a little bit of a weak point. Who says he can't be away from his house for a day or two? I mean, they're living in Hebron. And he was away. So she died when he was away. And Abraham is coming to eulogize her. Who says that he has to be, right? Okay, there. Shesham darim yamim v'rein asav v'yatzov v'uba sheni v'nivakata. Aval, lefi midrash. But if you go back to the story that Rashi likes better, right? Lefi midrash, that she died because she heard about the Akedah. So what? She is in Hebron when she hears that and dies. What is she doing in Hebron? If the Akedah originated in Be'er Sheva, what's she doing in Hebron, right? So you have to say, Ki Avraham v'Sara bizman ha'Akedah hayu darim b'Hebron v'sham nitztaveh. Therefore, it would be that the Akedah commandment came when they were already living in Hebron. They left Be'er Sheva at some point or another. They moved to Hebron, and God comes to him and tells him, go to the Akedah, right? From Hebron. They're living there. And he goes, right? And there, when you say 3 days, remember, he has a problem. He thinks it's not going to take 3 days to travel to Yerushalayim from Hebron. He thinks. I think it would take me 3 days. But anyway, he thinks that the geography is too close. Hebron and Yerushalayim are too close. So what's he doing for 3 days? Why 3 days? Vayisa Avraham et einav, ki lo nigla lo harar chemed Elohim ad yom hashlishi. והיה ביום בשני הימים הולך מסביבי ירושלים ולא היה רצון להראות לו. ואברהם אחר, period. So therefore, who told you, he says, according to this story, who told you he was going in a straight line? Right? This is cloud business. Who says he's going for a straight line? Avraham, Hashem shows him on the 3rd day from far away the mountain that will be the Akedah. But the first 2 days, Avraham is wandering around, doesn't know. He's waiting for Hashem to show him the place, which, by the way, makes the test, makes the nisayon much, much more painful, right? Much more difficult, right? Hashem told me to go to sacrifice him on the mountain where I will show you, right? Well, you know, and every moment is excruciating and painful, thinking he's going to sacrifice his son. So if it took 1 hour, sometimes you can say, yes, I'm going to do it, and you go and you do it, right? But here, time is passing, and he's being tormented in his brain. Am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? God, he has left me because he's not showing me, and it's, right? It's a fantastic, the Ramban's imagined story is much more fantastic to me right? Because it makes the image of the way that they're going much more beautiful. It's amazing, right? It's amazing. First whole 2 days. I'm into the third day. He doesn't know what he's doing, right? And it's more painful and more painful. The suspense is climbing until the third day. And he's going around. And Hashem did not want to show him yet. For Abraham, and then, so finally on the third day he has the Akedah, right? And Hashem stops him from killing his son. Good. Lo shav limkomo lechevron. Oh, now, why does he have to say this? If according to the Medrash, she died because she heard about the Akedah, what's wrong with that? What does he hear? How does he hear about it?
Explain where Abraham was coming from.
Why not from Yerushalayim? It doesn't seem reasonable to him.
He explains it.
אבל הלך תחילה אל באר שבע מקום האשל שלו לתת הודעה על ניסו. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, what an incredible scenario that is. What happens after the Akedah? He has his son, right, back. And he wants to thank God for this great moment, right? And his promise for his children and forever. So where does he go back to? He goes back to the place, remember, he planted an Eshel and he declared the name of God and he called out the name of God back there in the Eshel in Beer Sheva. Hebron is just a place they went to live in the suburbs, right? So he is suggesting, the Ramban, that his first place was, I've got to go to the place where God's name is dwelling, where I had declared in the name of God, where I had made the Eshel, where whatever, and that's where I'm going to thank God. And by the way, Yitzchak made a altar in Beer Sheva as well. So this is a holy place, right? It's already a holy place. So he went there.
It's Phillistine, right?
Yeah, that's right. But it's a holy, I mean, it's the place where they had a tradition of the sacrifices of an altar and an Eshel. So he wanted to go there.
It's included in the
Is this where he
Whatever.
According to Rabbi, this is where he got the Tzava of the Akedah?
The Tzava is in Hebron, he says. According to the Medrash, not the Ramban. He says, if you want to talk about the Medrash, that she died because of the Akedah, then you would have to say, and she's in Hebron, you would have to say that it's Tzava, that the commandment came in Hebron. And he's trying to figure out how that could be. So he says, according to that version of the story, this is what would happen. He is wandering around for 2 days, that's why it takes him longer, right? Even though they're in Hebron. And he ends up hearing about her death from Beer Sheva, not because they're living there, but because he goes there to thank God first. Then he's going to come back to Hebron. Except that when he goes there to help to thank her, he's coming to civilization. I guess he doesn't hear about it in Har Moriah because there's no human beings there. The newspaper doesn't get delivered to Har Moriah. But when he gets back to Beer Sheva, the internet is he goes to an internet cafe and he hears Sara died. That's the first time he could hear about it, right? Then, my wife died. He goes back home. He rushes back to Hebron where their home is. This is another way of solving the mystery, he's trying to say, right? And then Shama made that's a rauba. Umisha amar mehara moriaba, and some people say no. He's coming from where? From Har Moriah. Umisha amar mi Beer Sheva ba hakol ta'am echad. It could also work out. The only problem is that how would he hear about her death if he's coming back from Har Moriah? I don't know. Because, maybe he just came from Har Moriah, lispod, it sounds for the purpose of mourning her. So it must have been that he already knew or heard about it and he's coming to mourn her. Okay, he says, it works out if you want to. If you want to push it, it could work out either way.
I mean, the climate is not, the word morgues, where was she, after she died, where was she? That she wouldn't... Her body wouldn't spoil, the climate's hot, it's a hot climate. So anyway, I'm trying to say...
Maybe they had a way of embalming people and waiting, I don't know.
Did that? Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
ולפי זה, מה שאמר הכתוב, וישב אברהם בבאר שבע, יהיה עניינו כי בשובו מן העקדה שב אל באר שבע, ומשם הלך לקבור את שרה. ואחר הגבורה מיד חזר לבאר שבע ונתיישב שם שנים.
That looks to me that
So what's she doing?
Living
But according to
really
that
in
story,
Beersheba.
what is she doing in Beersheba? In Hebron, I mean.
That's where they were living.
In Hebron? Not a, but here he says, "Lefi zeh ma she'amar hakatuv vayeshev Avram Beersheva yeh inyano ki beshuvo min hakeda shav el be'er sheva." Right? Umisham halach likbor et Sara. Oh, I see. And then he goes to bury her because they had lived in Hebron before, and he goes to bury her, and then he goes back to Beersheba again rather than living in Hebron. And here lives there for a long time. והשלים הכתוב עניין באר שבע כאחד, ואחרי כן סיפר בקבורה, ושם בבאר שבע נשא יצחק את רבקה, כמו שאמר, והוא יושב בארץ הנגב. Oh, you got a problem again, I see. He's trying to explain something else. Remember, Yitzchak gets married later on, after Eliezer brings her back a wife, and it says he married her in the southern country.
That's
Not in
Beersheba.
Hebron. Not in Hebron. It's in Beersheba, he's assuming, right? He's assuming, right?
Yes.
So if he marries her in Beersheba, that means they ended up being in Beersheba again.
To me, that's the main place to live there.
If they are living there again at the end, so they're, according to him, according to this pshat, it would be they lived in Beersheba, they moved to Hebron. He gets the mitzvah to go to the Akedah in Hebron. He comes back either to Beersheba to thank God and then goes to bury her, or he comes back directly from Har Moriah because he heard about her death, to bury her. That's home, Hebron. Then after that, he says, I don't want to be in Hebron anymore. It's a place that reminds me of my wife's death all the time. I'm going back to Beersheba. Goes back to Beersheba with Yitzchak, a widower. He doesn't have his wife anymore now. After the Kavura, he goes back to Beersheba. That's why when he marries off Yitzchak, right? That's why when Yitzchak gets married, he's married in Beersheba, because they're in Beersheba again, right? So that's the way the scenario would go according to that, right? וזה דעת כל המפרשים, כי אברהם הוא במקום אחר ובא משם. You have to say that Abraham is at a different place when she dies, and he's coming to bury her, to mourn her. So you have to figure out where he's coming from. So you can't say that they were living in two different places, so you have to say that they were living in Hebron. How do they end up living in Hebron? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Right? ולפי דעתי, according to my opinion, כי היה לשרה אוהל שם עומדת ואמותיה לפניה, וכן כתוב באוהל יעקב ובאוהל לאה ובאוהל שתי אמהות. והנה שרה מתה באוהל אשר לה, ונכנס אברהם באוהל עם אחוזת מרעיו לספוד אותה. Oh, how do you like that? Very simple. You know what it says vayavo, what you mean by he came? He didn't come from a faraway place, he came from his tent.
Where?
It was customary in Hebron. She died in Hebron, right? And he's living in this tent over here, like it was customary in those days that there would be a tent for the women alone, and the man would have a tent, and he would go to her to be together with her whenever they were together, and she was there with her servants or her friends or whatever, and he would be there.
Very close.
And he would, could be across the little path, right?
Yeah,
Or the sheep in between, who knows what, right? And so she died, and he heard that she died in his tent, and he came 20 feet, he came to mourn her in her tent. I mean, who says you have to make up a story that he's far away, right? I'm sorry. והנה שם מתה באוהל אשר לא ונכנס אברהם באוהל עם אחזת מרעהו לספוד אותה. That's it. Or שהיה לשון ויבוא לאמור שנתעורר אברהם להספד הזה והתחיל לעשותו. כי כל המתעורר והתחיל במלאכה יקרא בא אליה. You know what? I ask you, did you build your sukkah already? You say, I'm coming to it. I mean, it's an expression in English also. Coming is also something you bring yourself, you're preparing to, you're concentrating to get there, you have your mind on it. I'm coming to it, right? Okay, so when the Torah says vayavo, it also means she could have even died in the same tent, right? Together with him. Vayavo lispoda means he prepared himself and was coming, so to speak, to eulogize her. Means you have to sit down and think about, how am I going to eulogize this woman, right? She's the greatest woman in the world, and I want to talk about how we first met and what she meant to me and what she did, all her great good deeds. I mean, whenever you want to put a hesped together, it takes preparation, right? So he prepared himself to eulogize her and to mourn her. You don't have to say it's from another distance. You don't have to say it's physical. It's intention.
Did her death have anything to do with the Akeda?
Right,
No.
right,
No.
right. That's according to Rabboteinu Amru, and according to that you would have to make some scenario, but I say the Fi Pshat, it's not so. Right, correct. Ramban doesn't have trouble, you don't have to have trouble. It's good to know the Ramban because it will give you some courage that if you hear a story when you're 5 years old that Rashi says so-and-so is a medrash, it doesn't mean that you have to believe the words of the medrash. You could also have a different approach.
And the verse
Oh,
first,
Sheyeh Lashon V'Yavo.
the verse
Literary.
first say that he's talking about the years of living with Sarah. So to me, it looks like she died like a natural cause because
It doesn't say anything about the Akedah being related.
Sarah
Really
died,
respond to
Sarah.
that. As a matter of fact, it says he went back to Beersheba and they dwelled in Beersheba with his boys and with Yitzchak and his boys. And he died there. And then he hears about the birth of such and 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 such, right? And then it says, and Sarah died. Who tells you that you have to connect it to the Akedah?
Yeah.
That's a more fantastical notion.
Well, this is an awakening for me. I mean, up till now, I always
Yeah, because it's Torah the youngest.
Simply,
You know what I mean?
the
It's
Torah
basically that's
says
right.
Sarah died in Kiryat
V'zeh
Arba
Lashon-
because of the Akedah.
You know, who doesn't say that? No, of course not. Of course not. It's not in the text. וזה לשון מורגל בדברי חכמים קרוא שנשים להגדיל בתמיד בא לו לגרה והניח בה שתי צלעות מכאן ובא לו לדופן השמאלית ובא לו לעוקץ ואמרם אני לא באתי לידי חמדה זו. He's giving you examples of psukim about ba, coming, meaning not coming physically, but coming to be prepared to, arriving at something in your mind. ובא בכתוב ובא בשכרו, right? שבא למלאכה ההיא ועשה אותה בעבור שכרו. Okay, ולא ייתכן בעיניי שבא מעיר אחרת אל חברון. It doesn't make sense to me, he says that he came from some other city to Hebron. שאילו היה כן, היה מזכיר אותו המקום. He says, and he came from such and such. It would be more reasonable to say. If he came from Beersheba to bury her in Hebron, it would say, and he came from. והיה כתוב מפרש, וישמע אברהם והיה במקום פלוני. Okay, so now we have quite a few scenarios. Quite a few scenarios, and according to him, the Pshat, he does propose a possibility. If you want to believe the Medrash of the Chachamim that she died because of the Akedah, then he proposes a possibility, two possibilities. One was it was from Hebron, and he comes up. Then it's a problem because from Beersheba. It's a problem because what's she doing in Hebron? So you have to say, which is a phenomenal imagination on his part, that the Akedah's commandment came from Hebron. They're living in Hebron, and he wanders for 2 days, unhelped by God. Eli Eli lama zavtani. In other words, he's going around. It's excruciating.
But
Doesn't mean right away. When Hashem says, I will show you, He doesn't mean I will show you right away. You may have to go through a lot of tribulations before Hashem shows you. Right? God gives you a test. Sometimes it's a very difficult test, right? He didn't promise him, I will show you tomorrow.
I mean,
I will show you. He told him when he left Ur Kasdim also, he says, Lech lecha me'artzecha la'aretz asher areka. He's wandering. He's wandering for a while. And in fact, Terach stays in one place and Nachor stays back on the way. Right? They didn't get there, it's Israel. Nachor, I'm talking about, his brother, right? Mm-hmm. Nachor stays in Lavan's land, right? I mean,
but
in Syria, wherever it is. Terach wanted on his way to go, but he died on the way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but so Hashem says, go to the land that I will show you. Who knows how long it took him? He left when he was 70, and he came
Where
to Eretz
is-
Yisrael when he was
Where is the place?
About the cloud and things.
the place. Where's the place? Doesn't know.
Something about the cloud part of the Midrash.
At the end, on the third day, according to him, it would be the third day that showed him. No cloud in the first 2 days. He's wandering in Yerushalayim, in the hills of Yerushalayim. He doesn't know anything about it. You get it? Until the last day, Hashem shows him. Nobody says a cloud. It doesn't have to be a cloud. Hashem shows him. However you want to see it. He shows him a light.
Baruch Hashem. Thank you, my.
I think it's fascinating, Ramban. He's got so many. It's baffling because he's got about 5 or 6 different ways of doing it. Until the very end, he says, "Keep it simple.
Yes.
Keep it simple." He was in this tent and she was in that tent, or he was in the same tent and he is preparing himself. That's what Vayavo means. End story.
Yeah.
It's less fantastic. It's less fascinating. It's less interesting. But it's fantastic that he could do that.
More plain.
No problem.
Thank you, my brother. May Hashem continue.
We
to
started
give
by
you-
being baffled about how could they be in this place and that place. And he says, "What are you talking about?"
Baruch Hashem.
Fascinating. Fascinating. I love it.